2, 1, you're live.
Good. So welcome everyone to our next event as a part of Glasgow 2024 Fandom, Global Fandom. We have some guests, which I will let them to introduce basically in a moment. Before that, there is a few words of introduction from my end. We have some attendees which we welcome as well from Eventbrite here in Zoom. We have hopefully a few people watching us on YouTube. As a kind reminder, Glasgow 2024 has a code of conduct which is available on our website, glasgow2024.org. Please make sure to check it in. We have a zero tolerance for any type of racism, anti-Semitism, etc. So please adhere to our rules, both in the chat and in the discussion, which I'm pretty sure we will adhere to our rules. For all the attendees in the webinar, please use the Q&A functionality of Zoom to post your questions if you have any. We'll try to pick them up through the panel, not at the end, but we'll be checking the Q&A through the panel to see if there are any interesting questions that we should answer. For those who are watching over YouTube, please post your questions in the comments. We'll also have a look at them as well, and we'll pick them up later. For those who will be tweeting or posting on social media, please tag all the posts with the hashtag Glasgow 2024 if you can. We'll appreciate that. And now, a few words of introduction of our guest today. We have 5 of you. I'll go from the top of my screen. You're in a vertical strip, let's say. So first on top is Vinga.
Hi guys, hello, I'm from Poland. I'm Vinga and I represent a guild called Tracon from Skierniewice.
Thanks. Marianna, you're next.
Hi, I'm Marianna, or Kisu. I'm from Finland, and I suppose I represent some parts of Finnish fandom, including but not limited to the Finnish National Convention Finncon. But I can unfortunately talk about almost anything. So yeah.
Great. Mikołaj.
Hi, I'm Mikołaj from Poland. I'm representing Warsaw Avant-Garde Society from Warsaw, and I'm also our administrator for European Science Fiction Society.
Great, thanks. Next, in order, Tony.
Hey, I'm Tony from Finland, and I'm again one of the fandom guys, and I represent maybe rest of the conventions in Finland. If Kisu is from Finncon, I'm from the other cons.
Great. And last not least, Marcin.
Hi, I'm Marcin, again from Poland. I live in Kraków, and I guess I'm representing retired con runners who still help from time to time.
Great. Yeah, you're not fully retired, but let's say that you're still indeed helping a lot. Thanks. So as you can hear, probably the word that will be repeated over and over and over for the next 1.5, not more, hour, will be fandom. And the theme or the main reason why we're here is to talk about the local fandoms. And you can already guess, for those of you who are listening, that we'll be looking to 2 particular fandoms, local fandoms, one in Finland and the second one in Poland. So before we get into history and let's say not so boring stuff, hopefully, but let me start with a more personal question to you. How did it started for you particularly? Because one thing is to be a fan and read books, watch movies, TV shows, play computer games, play all sorts of games, board games, card games, like the fandom or fantasy in general spreads across many formats. But how did it started for you when it comes to becoming part of the community of the fandom? Either science fiction, fantasy, but maybe you're also part of different sub-genres. We have also manga and anime fandom. We have other sub-fandoms. How did it started particularly? What is your route to fandom, let's say? Let me be picky. Maybe let's start with Marianna, unless someone wants to start.
I'll be happy to go first. My route to fandom was actually fairly typical in Finland for its time, as was the style in the days. I got into fandom through the Finnish Tolkien Society, and that has been called as the sort of gateway into fandom for a lot of people, especially in the 90s when I got into it. And I very quickly, I made my way into becoming an active member and really kind of, being actually even a board member, even a chair of Finnish Tolkien Society. And this was like in the mid-90s. And then my then boyfriend took me to my first Finnish national convention, Finncon, and that was 1995, and I was just blown away about, of all the wonderful things that were happening there. And then I went to my first role-playing convention, Åcon, that year as well, and that was just all totally amazing. So I really got into fandom through Tolkien, and then unfortunately the relationship with then boyfriend did not work out, as things tend to happen when you're a teenager. But when we split up, I kind of laughed that, I got the fandom in our divorce, so to speak. But I suppose that's the short answer on how I got into fandom.
Great. Yeah, indeed, Tolkienists, as we sometimes refer to them, but we do have also a lot of groups that are still, let's say, researching Tolkien works. Anyone wants to go next? I don't want to pick you one by one, but or anyone who has a slightly different route, maybe. See, Tony.
Let's go with Finnish conventions first. My road to fandom was basically role-playing games. Last millennium, like 80s, and from there, as I worked as a bouncer, I went to the convention security, and from there to the con organizers and fandom from that side. Basically role-playing games, and later, of course, computer games.
Great. I know that a few more people here probably had some roots in RPG tabletop games. I'm looking at Marcin specifically.
I knew you were looking at me. I was growing up in Eastern Poland in a small town, and I was for a long time I was only able to read about all those marvelous things in our sci-fi magazine and then in our role-playing games magazine, that there is a thing called conventions, there is something like fandom, and people do things. But first I sent a letter, which is apparently a very classic way to establish contact. So I started getting all the flyers for conventions. I was not able to attend because I was 14. It was very far to get anywhere from my home. Took me a couple of years to go to a convention. I think we were 17. We took all night train to the other corner of Poland. But when I moved to study in 2000, it was 1996 or 7, I immediately joined a sci-fi society in Kraków, and they were 1 month before running their convention in Ladvis. And I was like, oh my God, I found my people, I want to help. And this is how it all started.
Was it your first convention, actually?
I think, no, it was 5th or maybe 6th convention, but the very first one I was able to do something as a part of the con running team. Yes.
Great. Actually, I didn't know that. That's a news for me as well. Great. Vinga, how about you?
Well, in comparison, it seems that my adventure with fandom is kind of fresh. Actually, I believe it was 2013 when I started working in a city hall as a clerk in a department of culture. And one of the first cases that went through my desk was a petition from a local Star Wars fan club. The guys asked for help organizing the first fantasy convention in our small town. So I was amazed, like, oh my God, somebody else in my small little town is interested in fantasy and sci-fi and anything, and I was shocked. And it's 11 years later, and this convention is still happening and bigger than ever. But it wasn't, I believe, until 2016 that I went to any other convention than the one that I'm organizing. And well, since that happened, I believe I'm for 2 years now a member of a Polish Fandom Association, that it's an international national organization that has all the other organizations within it. So yeah, it was like a very fast track, I believe, for me.
You were forced into fandom by the community,
Yeah.
by the local fandom.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Mikołaj, how about you then? You're the last.
I think I also started somehow through RPGs because I started going to RPG camps for teens when I was 14. And I was going there for like 3 years without any other connection to fandom, but I was told there also about conventions. Then in 2015, I joined my first convention. In 2016, I went for the first international convention, for the Discworld convention in UK, because by the time and still I was a huge project fan. And it was my first international experience where I met 2 other Polish fans who are Pewóz and Ella Gepfert, and Pewóz is a Polish translator of Pratchett. So it was, when I met them at Polish conventions, I was like, I know these people, and they know a lot of people too, because they are in the fandom for many years. So it was kind of my way to Polish fandom, and I started volunteering at Polish conventions at my second convention ever. And since then, I volunteered at almost every convention I've been to. So my other way through the volunteering community. And now I'm also running conventions since 2019, I believe.
Only 2019. Okay.
Yep.
That's pretty recent. I thought that you were running conventions longer than that. But gophering, indeed.
Gophering since 2015, yeah.
I always see you gophering at the conventions, indeed. Okay, but then let's go to a little bit of a history, basically. We have 2 local fandoms. Maybe let's start from the Polish one. When did it started for the fandom in Poland? So what lies in at the beginning, at the foundation? Yeah, when it started, what was if you know, of course. I hope that we can delve a little bit into that direction, looking at the history. Yeah, I think that in both cases, I'm not sure about Finland, but those fandoms are not as old as the American fandom, for instance, which is very, very old comparing to what we have, at least in Poland. So when did it started here in Poland? I don't know.
I don't want to point fingers, but I believe that Marcin is the
I was trying not to point.
Yeah, I was going to say that hopefully my friend who is even more into Polish fandom history is not listening, because I'm sure I will say something stupid. Just to give you brief background, our fandom is quite young, dating from the 70s of the previous century, and this is because for a long time after Second World War, we had no freedom of association in Poland due to communist rule. There were, if I recall correctly, some attempts to establish some small sci-fi societies, but they always were attached as maybe chapters or cells to some other government-run associations. And after the situation changed a bit, it was in the 70s, first national sci-fi club was established, I think, in 1976, which was also the year the Åcon was held in Poland. Due to our government was more like a science fiction conference than a real convention, but this is, I think, believe generally accepted moment or year when the fandom in Poland started, because after that we started getting conventions in Poland and some sci-fi societies started popping up on the map. So we've been here for 50 years, almost 50 years. Yeah. In comparison to US fandom, it's not much.
But in general, it's also quite long already, I would say. So not
it
bad.
Is, I mean, it is pretty much the same in Finland. If I may kind of jump in here, Tony, I'll be happy to talk about this because I'm so old. I don't know. In Finland, approximately 50 years as well. in the late 70s, local clubs started popping up here and there. Turku Science Fiction Society is the oldest one, which is actually still very active today. It's still running. The Finnish Tolkien Society was founded 31 years ago, 31 years ago, so even that's fairly old. Helsinki Science Fiction Society, Tampere Science Fiction Society, all dates back to the 80s. The interesting thing, of course, here is to notice that we don't have a Finnish Science Fiction Society. All of these science fiction societies are local and localized to different cities. We have the Tolkien Society is a national society, as well as the Association for Science Fiction and Fantasy Authors or Writers. So that's also sort of like national. But apart from that, it's always been like very localized. But based from this all very, very localized thing also came the first or our biggest convention, well, arguably the biggest convention, Finncon, our national convention, which was first run in its current incarnation in 1989. And that actually laid up a lot of groundwork on what conventions for the longest time in Finland were like, especially Finncon. Basically, at that point, the organizers came up with two rules. It has to be big, and it has to be free of charge for the attendees, which is something that makes it slightly different from other conventions all over the world. And from Finncon, other conventions found their way. Åcon, our biggest role-playing convention, just celebrated its 30th year this year, and anime conventions and all sorts of other conventions kind of sprung from that over the course of the years. But like in the late 80s, early 80s, early 90s, that's when things really started happening. The two biggest fanzines were founded then, and they're still running. So again, not as old as in some places, but not entirely new either. I would like to add here, because now that I got the microphone, I think that the point when Finnish fandom really exploded into the world's consciousness was in 2005 in Glasgow, the Glasgow Worldcon, where Finns, for reasons unknown, decided that it would be a good idea to throw a party just for the sake of throwing a party. And we're all adults here, so I can tell you that one of our sponsors was Finland and Vodka. And we were extremely popular. I mean, we had a lot of vodka. We had a lot of visitors there. And I think for a lot of people, that was the moment like, hey, these Finns actually, they exist. So I think that was for us a kind of a big turning point, which then like 12 years later led into a Worldcon being in Finland. So
I was going to ask actually if that was some sort of a beginning of the idea to run your own Worldcon eventually.
That was not the beginning of that idea. That was one of those okay, this is great. We're never ever gonna do a Worldcon. And yeah, Tony, you were there. We were there. We did that, and yeah, but that was it. Came later. In 2005, I got my first idea that maybe I could run a Finncon. It's scary, but maybe I could do like maybe a teeny tiny part of it. Maybe organize a masquerade or something. And then when my hometown Tampere had its first Finncon, I was naturally the chair of it because that's the way things go.
Nice. You touched a few points that I planned for later, but I think we can maybe jump around the topics because you mentioned the oldest club that's still active in Finland. Which is the oldest in Poland currently, and is it still active?
I believe it's Śląski Klub Fantastyki, Silesian Fantasy Club, but I may be mistaken. Marcin?
It's the oldest one running. Yeah, it's the oldest one that is still
existing. Yeah, I think so. As a member, I can proudly say so, I think.
What about Gdański Klub Fantastyki?
It was founded in approximately the same time. Same for Ad Astra.
Yeah.
They're all like.
Ad Astra started a year later, I think.
Yeah, 40 years running. But I think the oldest one was in Warsaw. It was like a very, very long name. It was founded in 1976, but it doesn't exist anymore. It was
the National Polish Sci-Fi Fan Association, something. Yeah.
Whatever.
And the other topic that you mentioned, Marianna, also about the national convention. So we'll probably talk about the Polish National Convention just in a second. But you mentioned that the expectation, I don't know if that's the right word, but the expectation or intention of maybe con runners who are running the NatCon in Finland is to make it as big as possible, you are saying.
Well, it tends to be fairly big. I mean, one of the aims is to make it big, and we've always made a point of having a very international convention. We've always had programming obviously in Finnish, but also in Swedish, which is our other national language, and also a lot in English. So we always try to have at least one program track entirely in English, and not just with the guests of honor. And the thing with Finncon, because it doesn't sell tickets, it doesn't have membership fees, it's really easy for people to just, wander in and see, what is this place? Who are these strange people? I go and listen to one program item. And that's, of course, where it's really easy to bring in the numbers. The attendees don't have to commit like years in advance to pay huge amounts of money to travel very far. So it just it has become fairly big on its own right. Now, having said that, it is not the biggest convention in Finland. We have larger ones. Tracon, the role-playing convention, that is definitely bigger than Finncon. Tracon, the role-playing and anime convention, that is also bigger than Finncon. So it is big, but it's not the biggest. And by big, I mean this year we had roughly about 5,000 people coming and going, but Tracon and Tracon are even bigger than that. So yeah, but they do sell tickets. We don't.
Yeah,
and I'm sure Tony is able to talk about both of these much more than I am, because I've never organized Tracon.
Me neither, actually. I have been the security head there, but I have been organizing Tracon. Tracon is roughly 5,500 to 6,000 people. This year we are hoping to get over 8, because we have a new venue in Tampere, and the hotel is totally in our use, with all the music halls and stuff like that. But in Worldcon there was attendance maximum of 7,000 people this year, if I don't remember totally incorrectly. But yeah, actually I had to make a news. I have never been in Finncon.
I hear a statement that maybe next one there is a good chance that maybe Tony will show up. I think that sounds like a quite sizable convention, I'll say, anyway, even especially I'll say if you don't sell memberships and it's completely for free. It's actually quite impressive.
It is pretty big, and this is also something that quite a few of our non-Finnish visitors are actually really amazed, because let's be honest, Finland is not a huge country. I mean, there's 5.5 million of us, and we speak a language that nobody else understands. And still, we manage to pull off nearly annually this pretty big convention. It travels around a little bit, so there are slightly different organizers every year, because otherwise it would be just crazy. Obviously, both Tracon and Worldcon do have the same venue and same organizers each year. But Finncon it's a tricky beast to handle, but it is very rewarding. Let's put it that way. I have chaired it 3 times. This year, I was only involved as the guest of honor liaison, so nothing major this year, just a small, tiny thing.
And where is it organized? And approximately when?
Approximately first weekend of July, usually. And the cities vary. This year it was in Tampere. Next year is going to be in Jyväskylä, which is about 3 hours by train from Helsinki. Helsinki, or the capital city area, is the third place where it's organized. And then it is also organized in Turku. And we kind of take turns. We don't really bid. There is a very, very unofficial and loose kind of organization going on, which city has their turn. So nobody has to do it every year, but roughly every 4 years. So that's how it goes.
Nice. Okay. Well, that's pretty impressive, as I said. especially considering that you're moving it around, and it's every year you're saying it's roughly 5,000. Yeah, so it's
sometimes a bit more,
maintains the
sometimes
size.
a bit less. I mean,
Yeah.
when it's in the capital city area, it tends to be slightly bigger than when it's in the more rural areas, for
Nice.
obvious reasons.
Of course. How about Polish NatCon? There is one. There is a Polish NatCon, of course, as I can give you the hint already. I don't know. We have few people who, more than few people, I think all of you attended. Few of them, to say the least. I don't know if anyone would like to.
I even organized the 2019 Białystok Polcon, in theory at least. It's a long story about Białystok Polcon. Yeah, but Polcon, the National Polish Convention, if I already taken the voice, so I think I continue, started in, there will be 40th edition in 2025. So it started in 1985. And it's roughly, it depends between the editions, but I think the biggest one was in Warsaw 2013. It was 5,000. Usually it's around 1,000. I think it's like the usual size, and it's hosted between different cities. It's voted ahead where it would be hosted, pretty much like Worldcon mechanism. So this year, in 2 weeks, it will be in Łódź. Next year will be in Toruń. Last year it was in Krakow. I think the most important issue currently is the fact that we stopped making it as one event called Polcon, and there is just Polcon brand, but we joined it, we allowed to join it with the local conventions. So if local convention from Łódź or Toruń, like this year, are willing to make a Polcon, they can make their own convention joined with Polcon. And I think it helped to solve some of our problems with NatCon. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can, if I can just add one thing, because not everyone knows that there was a Polcon before Polcon. First official Polcon was in 1985. However, there was one Polcon in 1983. It was organized by that National Sci-Fi Association that nobody really liked at the time. So it's not considered a proper Polcon. And I believe there was some issues because it was government endorsed, like everything back at that time, but there was some animosity, so it's not, the name stayed, everything else went away, so the first proper Polcon took place in 1985.
It sounds very Polish.
Sounds indeed very Polish. So there are some similarities. Both NatCons are traveling across different places. Basically, they are rotating the con runners, so it's different organization usually. The one thing I may add also, because I had the pleasure to organize the last year Polcon as a vice chair, and I think that that's a trend. That's why I was quite impressed that you managed to gather 5,000 people without a membership, and it holds. Not sure why we were not able to do that, but I think that I have a wild guess. But the general idea since last few years was to allow smaller associations or clubs to organize it, not to aim for a massive event that the small organization may not be able to manage. So I think it opened few doors for smaller clubs to try themselves, let's say, and take the mantle and organize a local Polcon event, let's call it like that, in a smaller town, which was almost virtually impossible in the 5 or 7 years ago. The expectations was basically that it has to be measured in thousands and always aiming very, very high in case of volume.
Yeah, basically the idea behind the change is quality, not quantity.
Yeah, which doesn't mean that it cannot be measured in thousands. And as I said, that it's really impressive that you managed to do it in Finland, especially when we look at some recent editions that we had. It's not always smooth. Sometimes it's very bumpy. I think Mikołaj already gave a hint about one of the editions that was a bumpy one. Speaking of conventions, because that's my wild guess why it's no longer expected in Poland to be so big, the NatCon. But how is the? I don't know if you have the answer to that question, but at least your feeling. How big is the local fan base? And I was thinking how we can measure that, because it's at least few things we can measure, but we can measure in number of conventions that we have in both countries every year. We can measure in the size of those conventions, because maybe a few of them are massive, maybe they are mostly small gatherings. We can also measure it maybe by number of active clubs or associations that there are, and how active they are. What do you think? How big is the fan base locally? I don't know if we should start with Finland or Poland.
You want to take a wild guess?
I was looking at almost like answering the question.
The fandom, what are we counting into the fandom?
That was like my thought as well. What is fandom? And let's not go there.
We're going into that direction.
If we are counting sci-fi nerds, rollerblading geeks, LARPing enthusiasts, I think that the base is roughly 50,000 in Finland, give or take. We have so many small groups around Finland in the far north that basically never joins in conventions or anything, but they still are really active, like Oulu region and Rovaniemi region in the northern part of Finland. There are large role-playing groups, large LARPing groups, and they have their own Same literature, science fiction literature things going on there. So roughly 50,000 maybe.
I mean, we have quite a few active associations that we do know about, but then on the other hand, for example, in my hometown Tampere, we have the Tampere Science Fiction Society, which basically doesn't do anything except publish a fanzine, but we still have a fairly active fandom here as well. And then when we start counting everybody in the anime fandom, then we are talking about even huger numbers. In addition to Finncon, if we leave out the anime conventions, we tend to have like 4 or 5 smaller conventions throughout the year, roughly say 50 to 100 people, slightly depending. But these are more specifically science fiction and fantasy as we use to mean it, and these are kind of very small, usually literature oriented things. But then when we start adding all the anime conventions, but there's at least probably one every month, and they are huge. They're really, really big. So it's really difficult to tell. And obviously there is a lot of overlap. You know, people who go to anime conventions come to SF conventions, and the other way around. And of course, same with the role-playing group. There is a lot of overlap there as well.
Yeah, and in Finland we have this thing called helmet, like a helmet. It's a Helsinki metropolitan library thing, and they are holding 3 conventions a year in public funding, and they are 2 to 4,000 people. They are completely free, and it's part of the cultural education thing for the children and youth.
And those groups, because if I read it correctly, you're saying that it could be the case that you have few organized association, but people are rather self-organized. Yes, locally they gather basically.
I would probably say that because, as I said, no Finnish science fiction society, but people do a lot of stuff locally. And of course, because these days it's surprisingly enough a lot easier to be connected to people locally. You don't necessarily need that association as much as you needed it earlier, because that was the way to get in touch with people. Nowadays, we have this thing called the internet, which helps a lot. So I would imagine a lot of people find their people, their tribe through, well, various internet forums and such. But this is just a guess.
Yeah, and in Finland we have laws about running conventions. We have slightly tighter laws about running public conventions. So we need to have like security. They need to be trained professionals always. They can't be people just coming in and working as a security. So most people that are in the fandom and running conventions, they know each other from the Finland side, and they tend to travel to other conventions as well because there are legal needs to be filled.
Makes sense. How about Polish fandom? I don't know if anyone knows these numbers are changing, especially after COVID, to my knowledge, but I don't know if anyone knows how many conventions by name, let's say, we have these days every year in Poland.
I stopped at around 100 yearly, but I have no idea how accurate currently this number is.
I think it's around 100, ranging from the small local ones like 500 people to Portti, our biggest fantasy, basically not a convention, it's a fantasy festival, but it has yearly, I think, 50,000 people,
55,000.
Yeah, last year.
It's huge. But a huge part of it is also manga and anime fandom. So yeah.
But pretty much every weekend there are 2-3 events during summer. Every major city has their own event. There is a lot of things to do, surely.
Yeah, perhaps except of Portti, the biggest ones are like 5,000-6,000 people, maybe up to 10.
Yeah, after Portti there was Falcon, which is no longer in Lublin, which had the biggest edition, I think, around 8,000. Copernicon in Torun has 4,500, 5,000. I don't know in word.
3,000 something.
Warsaw Animatsuri.
Yeah,
is
Animatsuri,
like
the anime in Warsaw is also quite big. That's the biggest one, I think.
Yeah, that is the.
And historically, the Warsaw Polcon also had 5,000, and I think it was also one of the biggest events.
There is also the one in Wrocław that apparently is growing every year quite significantly.
Yeah.
I lost track how many people are attending.
And they also kind of free to join, which is important in context of Finncon.
Yeah, I mean, maybe to be precise, part of the programming I think is free of charge.
Yeah,
part is which is interesting because actually they changed the model. I don't know if that's something you ever heard in Finland or generally in case of convention, but they changed the model when they charge for individual program points, items. Yeah, so if you want to go for a particular panel or anything, basically there is whatever have you, you can only select this one and pay, I think, relatively small amount of money to get in. So you can be very, very picky on what would you like to attend.
I haven't heard any Finnish conventions doing that, but then again, I haven't been to every single one of them. I think the ones, I mean, the majority of them, of course, have either they sell tickets, but I think that basically covers everything. And I don't think, I mean, most of the conventions don't have celebrity guests like actors who would charge separately for visiting them either, but this is something I really don't know. None of the conventions I've ever been to, let's put it that way.
In Finland, we have had celebrity actors that charge for like signings and stuff like that, but not many. I think Åcon has been the only one.
Åcon, that was the one.
Yeah, we had Star Wars guests there. But normally Finnish cons do tend to sell tickets, and that covers everything. Except if the item, if the lecture or something actually has something to give to you, like making some kind of medieval clothing or something like that, that might cost something like 5 to 10 euros to join in because of the material costs. But
yeah,
that's the only thing. We tend to have really low ticket costs as well.
Which is also maybe that's an interesting point. So how I know that it'll be difficult to put it an average number, but if you had to say how expensive it is basically to attend a convention, like the membership on average in Finland, considering regular one, not the one that will involve extra costs or sign-offs, autographs?
30
to 40 euros.
40 euros, yeah.
It's
I
not
would
much.
say the same.
That's
Yeah.
that's a pretty much basic around. Depends on Tracon is 40 and Robocon is 30, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. But
For the
yeah.
Finnish standards, I think, which is probably much more expensive than Poland in general, I think that's pretty reasonable.
No, it is. It's very reasonable, and I think that's the thing that all the conventions have managed to do is to keep their costs low for the attendees, and then get their money from other places.
Yeah,
so that's which is good.
I just got I just got the info from my wife, and she said that it's 45 euros for Robocon.
But still, it is what 3 days, full days, packed with programming, and it is big, and they've got everything.
Finnish largest venue. It's Messuhalli.
Yeah, that's of course the thing when you organize big conventions, that I'm sure everybody agrees here. That's one of the biggest things, is where can you find a venue large enough and cheap enough, because and also suitable, because not all venues are suitable for conventions. There is like a really big exhibition hall here in Tampere, and everybody's like, why don't they take Tracon there? Well, it is built for sports. It would it would enable them to get in like 30,000 people, but they would not have room for program items, for example. So it's just finding that place. I'm really happy to hear that Tracon has found new venue or extra new spaces, because that has been a problem for them for years. It's too popular. Everybody wants to go there. I'd like to get a ticket there, but I don't have one.
Tracon is actually in Tampere Talo. But they build a new hotel next to Tampere Talo, so it's part of the new venue. So it's
so I
basically
gathered.
It's basically double in size,
which is great, and obviously not possible when they started, because the hotel didn't exist then. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and Finnish fandoms. Most conventions are sold out. Tracon sells out in minutes. Åcon, our largest purely AnimeCon, sells out in seconds, and it's like 5,000 people as well. Robocon never sells out because the venue is insane in size, but still it's big.
Yeah, which is, moving back to Polish fandom, also a little bit new, especially for the science fiction fantasy fandom, I believe, but I'll leave maybe a little bit of space for you guys to explain, because I think that it's not really popular, only became a thing in the last year's Åcon for sure, to have a capacity. So we usually didn't set up a capacity for the convention. I mean, there was always the safety capacity, let's say, so the building cannot hold more people than physically it can, but I think that we had a case last year, first time for Åcon for sure, when there was like a very, very much limited number of memberships. And
it was a second Åcon with limits. The first one was in 2010 in Cieszyn. I think it was 1,500 people there, something like that. But
also Panelia/Åcon 2021 had limit. They not reached it, but they had limit of 1,000.
That was never a problem. We never had to deal with so many people coming to our conventions.
So it sounds like we need to encourage more people from Finland to come to Poland. If you miss the tickets for one of those. No, but that's unless of course you'd love to
basically
see
the conventions just work with the price to reach out how many people they can how many people can enter or can't. I believe that standard convention in Poland costs around 20-30 euros. I think it's like the average. Of course, there are ones that are much cheaper. However, I'm not sure if it's a place to talk about it, but I think it's a basic model of organizing conventions in Poland is that as the attendees pay for the ticket, most of the people that organize the conventions, that is the most casual way, don't. The volunteers, the people that create a program, I don't know, lectures, anything, take, for example, attend in the cosplay competition, they usually enter the convention for free.
There is one exception. I think maybe there are more, but one notable, let's say, which is a gaming convention in Warsaw, Zjawa, which is one that actually everyone pays. Yeah, so it's more like a model that you will not know more from Worldcon, but the membership is
it is run by my society, by Avantgarde, and we also have second event, Bazyliszek during summer, because Zjawa is during winter, and Bazyliszek, for compare, is completely free event. So everyone pays the same amount of 0 zlotys also.
Yeah. There are a few free conventions in Poland as well. Another example is the one held in Opole city, which is Åcon, which is also for free. Yeah, everyone is invited to join. No membership costs, basically. You still need to get your badge, but you don't pay for it.
Yeah. In Finland, it's customary that everybody who's working in the con gets it free. Every time, always.
It's very similar, I think.
I'm not sure about every single convention in Poland, but at least Polcon used to be run in a way that everyone, even the con runners, were expected to pay the membership fee. And the model, from what I remember from the discussion, it was always moving towards panelists getting free, cosplayers sometimes also get some discount, and con runners getting free, because a lot of con runners or panelists in Poland are young people, or used to be young people, high school students or first year students, and so on. So they would not afford a convention otherwise. So apart from couple of exemptions, it was usually, if you do something for the con, you get in free. And also that's why, when talking about Polish conventions, we used to have sleep rooms at the venue. I think after the pandemic, it's been disappearing a bit. So, not really, because I saw some conventions explicitly say no sleep rooms starting as of now.
Again,
I feel okay.
It's coming back, Marcin. Opole, I think, also provides.
That's good.
Copernicon provides sleep rooms this year. Skercon did provided sleep rooms. But maybe worth to mention in general that the convention venue for Polish fandom doesn't have to be exhibition hall. It is still sometimes a school. So any building goes, as long as there are rooms, basically, chairs and something that you can use to show your slides or just talk or do whatever is there in the programming. I don't know.
I mean, it is the same here, and many, especially Finncons, they usually take place at local universities, which are wonderful for conventions because they literally have like loads of different sized rooms next to each other, and you can do a lot of stuff in them. But as Tony mentioned, there's also the ones that are libraries. There's one that is more specifically a hotel convention in these sort of like Worldcon, EasterCon kind of thing, but that's in Marianna, that's in the Åland Islands, and it's a very, very small relaxicon, Åcon. But apart from that, they can take place anywhere, basically.
And the
in Finnish cons, if it's a weekend one, we tend to have sleeping arrangements, sleeping rooms, some kind of dormitories for attendees as well, for free. This year, Tracon actually charges for sleeping conditions because of the hotel.
Okay, go on.
Go on, Marcin.
No, I just wanted to say that I believe that we have only one ongoing hotel convention, which is NordCon. It's a Relaxacon held in December at the end of the convention season. There is not much program as such. It's to come there, meet friends and unwind after the whole year of doing conventions. And I can't say anything more because what happens at NordCon stays at NordCon. But please come. It's at the seaside. It's a very nice venue, 150 meters to the Baltic Sea, next to the forest.
And
it's
one
nice.
one of the closest to Finland for sure.
I was gonna say,
Yes.
and apparently Relaxacons tend to be this way because same with Åcon, it is usually at the beginning of the convention season during the Ascension Day weekend. But I can't say much more because what happens at Åcon stays at Åcon unless pictures are posted to local fanzines, which has also happened, it wasn't me, luckily, but yeah.
Undesired, I guess, but
Let's put it this way, that we didn't think anybody would be publishing those pictures, but apparently the person in the pictures approved them before they went live. So yeah.
the rules exist for a reason. Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe one clarification. I think we had, because we also have a SMOFCon in Poland, or our equivalent of one. And I think that this year there was a panel about the conventions that are taking place in the hotels in Poland, and there are more actually matching than one.
Okay, good to know.
But again, that's
There are
depending on
4 conventions, I believe.
that depends what we what we count as a part of science fiction fantasy, which the Western fandom will count Fury as a part of a sub fandom of the science fiction and fantasy as well. And there are 2 of them, if not 3, I think. So there are actually quite some, but there are also Relaxacons, like you mentioned, and slightly different fandom, but they are sizable. I think that the one in Gdańsk is also roughly 700-800 people last year, so it's pretty big already. Moving back, because we ventured into convention area, which we'll probably get back in a second, but just to check also on the local activities, in the smaller towns maybe, or even in cities, how active people in Poland, because we covered Finland, but how active people are locally outside of the conventions, and are they active in organized groups like associations, or are they more, again, self-organizing through either social media platform or just generally locally gathering to do whatever you call? Mostly probably tabletop games again, but not limited to. I know that some people are gathering also to talk about books and movies.
Actually, most big cities have their own association, organization or anything. I believe the only one that doesn't have any bigger or long existing one is Mikołaj's hometown, but it's just another proof that Szczecin doesn't exist. The Polish Fandom Association has like 12 members. Those are all national organizations from all around Poland. There are quite a lot of them. But I think almost anywhere you go in Poland, you can find a smaller group of fans that are, I don't know, a Star Wars fan club, a tabletop games fan club, tabletop RPGs group or anything. So basically, I think that there are a lot of them. Even in Skierniewice, I was surprised. It's a small town. It's we even don't have 50,000 citizens. And our organization has now almost 100 members, including recruits. I think that every place has a possibility to attract more fans.
Kawai?
I have to defend my hometown, Szczecin, which has currently some events. They are not big, but this year was first in 10 years anime conventions in Szczecin. And we have
1 week ago.
Yeah, 1 week ago, and we have some small science fiction fantasy events held in local library called Beton, and this year it will be, I believe, 5th edition of Beton. It's mostly comics related, and they publish fanzine connected to the comics every edition. The fanzine is called Cement at the Beton event, so it's nice wordplay. But we have something.
I'm intrigued and really tempted to ask what made that name. By the way, this is
actually I have no idea.
Concrete, basically. Okay, yeah, but indeed, 1 week ago there was a manga and anime convention, Mizukon, basically, first edition, and indeed one of the first conventions since 10 years now. And it's also there is also a club behind it, so it's not just. And again, maybe a side note: some of the conventions are organized. All of them are organized by institution, so there is always some organization behind, but it also depends. Some conventions are more like a initiative from the very lower level, let's say, fans, and sometimes it's very organized, but really depends on which one you will be looking at. I see, Tony, you are mentioning already in the chat something that I was going to ask about anyway. So let me ask about it now. So looking at the fandom, and we mentioned already Fury fandom, but not limited to, how diverse then the fandom is locally in your country. Yeah, because we can distinguish science fiction, fantasy. We can talk about manga and anime, which is probably the two biggest, let's say, blocks, if you want to call them like that, or types of fans we have. Sometimes this is these two groups are interluded, so some people are in both, some people are only interested in one or the other. But what else can you distinguish locally in your fandom? Yeah, what other sub fandoms maybe around particular topic, like the one you hinted, Tony, in the chat, or maybe around particular IP, so particular books, particular movie series, or anything. Is there, how diverse it is, basically?
Very, but as I said earlier, there is a lot of overlap as well. We have had the Åcon was the Star Wars convention, but apart from that, we have had very few, very specific, just one fandom conventions. I can't think. There was the My Little Pony one, but I think that's, and Åcon have been. I don't think we've had any Star Trek conventions specifically or Doctor Who conventions specifically, but all the other conventions tend to kind of cover these all. So kind of, I think there is a lot of that. Obviously, there are the associations. I already mentioned Finnish Tolkien Association. There's also the Finnish Lovecraft Association. So at least those two exist. There used to be Star Trek associations, at least in Tampere and in the capital city area, but I have no idea if the capital city area one still exists. The one in Tampere does not. That much I do know. But I think, Tony, you might know more about these than I do.
Well, there's a Star Wars 501 Legion in Finland, and then there is I think there's a Potter Society of some
There
sort.
probably is.
Potterverse. Yeah, but I have dropped out of it.
Oh, one thing that
fandom.
I would like to mention, because it does have its own fandom and it does have its own convention, is of course Praedor, one of the biggest science fiction franchises. It's not a franchise in Finland. It is.
It is a franchise.
It is a franchise. Okay, it is a franchise. It is based on the graphic novels by the Finnish artist Petri Hiltunen, who did them all throughout the 80s and 90s and still does them. But Praedor also nowadays includes role-playing games, novels, short story collections, cookbook, and it has its own convention. Music, yes, it has its own, and it has its own convention, which I think is going to be in 2 weeks' time. But basically, it is a franchise because the original author still does them, but there are so many other people who also write for that same universe, and it's being published by several different publishers, and it is great. It is wonderful.
I wonder if it's something that we have in Poland, actually, because I never heard about it.
I'm not sure.
Basically,
it hasn't been translated, unfortunately.
It's in English. There has been some English versions of Praedor already. I have been talking with Ville quite a lot about it. Ville Vuorela is one of the makers of the role-playing games and the books for it.
If you could, maybe, if I can kindly ask you to drop a link in the chat for people, because this is really interesting. I never heard about it, and really love
the artwork for the cover for the big edition was nominated for this year European Science Fiction Society Awards. As a award administrator, I remember that.
Nice. Really would love to read more, because it's a pity that it's never translated and never reached Poland, or for wider audience, any country.
I'm trying to look for on English pages. I found the Finnish pages. I'll drop the link.
Yeah, thanks for that. And how about Polish fandom? Yeah, because I know personally about few events that took part in the past. Let's say, for instance, there was an event for the Doctor Who fandom. I'm not sure. It doesn't exist, I think, since a few years, but how diverse is Polish fandom there?
I think that this is quite similar as a situation in Finland, because we have our sci-fi fandom, that covers, let's say, sci-fi, fantasy, and for me, role-playing games, because I'm mostly right now gamer, but I feel that I belong to something wider than just me gamers and I. There is manga and anime fandom. We grew up together, sci-fi fandom and manga and anime fandom, and we went separate ways. And some people still consider them part of wider, let's say, greater fandom. They have, but they have their own conventions. There is still some kind of overlap. We have miniature wargamers. They also tend to have own events, but they were and are still very welcome at general sci-fi conventions. We have Hex Encounter wargamers, very small group, but they do still exist in Poland. Horror fans that used to run their own convention, at least in Krakow. I believe it's no more. We used to have some Star Wars events. I don't think that they take place anymore again, but
still do, but they are small ones.
Yeah, okay, I can be wrong. We might have also had 1 or 2 Star Trek conventions, because at least we used to have very active Starfleet chapter in Poland. I don't know what happened to them. I haven't seen them for a long time, but they might be still out there somewhere.
The last edition of Traxfera, the yearly event of Star Trek fandom, was at Conline 2021. They joined our convention.
Yeah,
I think they were planning something for this year Portcon, but I may be mistaken. But I think I heard something like that.
One friend who was involved in Star Trek fandom will be there, so they might come. And so yeah, I guess this is very similar. Our general sci-fi cons, well, general. So we have books or literature in there, comic books, games, and so on. But we have also some very focused events, like Rino mentioned Doctor Who. We have role-playing games conventions, usually very small, focus on gaming only, and so on and so on. So a lot of overlap, but also a lot of different or separate bubbles or pockets where things are happening, and not always we have any visibility what's going on there.
Yeah, there still are, or at least there were, a lot of conventions that are revolving around specific universes. Like, I don't know, there was a Sherlockon. I believe there was one in Warsaw about My Little Pony even. So you can find actually anything. But I think there is also a huge part of events that revolve around Slavic mythology and culture. Yeah, they're actually growing quite big right now.
There was a mention about the one event that I truly didn't heard about until now. From Agalatea about the Åcon. Maybe for the context, Reksio is a character from the cartoons, Polish cartoons made in the last century, previous basically during the previous era. But it's really encouraging to hear that actually there is an event centered around it, because it's a really legendary, let's say, cartoon and legendary character. Yeah. In last year. I'm not sure if that means that there will be one in this year. And the one mentioned about the Star Wars in Poland that I also think that doesn't happen anymore was Star Force, so the biggest convention for the Star Wars fans. But I also think that it ceased to exist, or maybe it will come back in the future.
There is also a Holocron in Łódź. It is only paused for now because they are working on the building. I don't know, it's about to be destroyed or something, but it will come back somehow, somewhere, I hope.
Yeah. And in general, there is I don't know if that's also something that happens in Finland, but there is a tendency that after COVID, especially after such a long time now, which is over 3 years now, conventions are coming back. Yeah? And I think I'll even dare to say that the new conventions are popping everywhere, because people are pretty much starving for conventions and seeing each other and talking about things they can geek about. I don't know if that's something that you also observed in Finland. I see nodding, so I'm taking it as a yes.
It most certainly is.
Yeah, people are very open to join other conventions as well that are on the fringe of their normal fandoms.
Great, good to hear that. So maybe turning a little bit into slightly different direction, still all connected with fandom as the main connecting word to all these topics. Do you have, and if you have, what are those? Any local awards or recognition or anything that you have in your local fandom, which is aiming to recognize authors or fans, but not limited to, or generally people from the science fiction community, or in general fandom, doesn't have to be science fiction, fantasy could be manga, anime as well, or any other fandom. So some things that could be modeled after such awards like Hugo or Nebula, but not necessarily have to. Do you have any things like that? I don't know who wants to start.
We do.
I see nodding from Kisu.
We do.
I see Mikołaj smiling, so I think that some of you at least have something.
You want to go first, Tony?
Okay. We have Golden Dragon, Kultainen lohikäärme in Finnish. It's a time-honored tradition from 2003 was the first Golden Dragon Award. It's given in Åcon for important people in the fandom. It's basically writers, role-playing game designers, other computer game designers, music composers. I think there's one cosplay artist that won the world championship. I think she got one. And then there are other cultural people that are working on the fandom that has got it.
And then I may add these more traditional meaning literary awards, because we also have them. We have the Tähtivaeltaja and Tähtifantasia Award given out by the Helsinki Science Fiction Society for the best science fiction novel and best fantasy novel published in Finnish. This may include Finnish novels or translated works. We also have the Kuvastaja or Mirror Mirror Award given out by the Finnish Tolkien Society, and that is for the best Finnish fantasy novel, specifically Finnish. Can be written in Swedish, but it has to be Finnish. And then we have the Åcon Award, which these three, the previous three are all juried awards, but the Åcon Award is voted by the fandom, and that is for the best Finnish short story published during the previous year. And there is a pretty big community around that specific award. People get together in different cities to meet and talk about the finalists and have long and very involved discussions about these. And I think these are probably the major 5 awards that our fandom kind of gives out, either juried or voted on by the fandom. Once again, kind of like Hugo's and Nebulas, where they also depend on, who gets to choose them. But I think these are the most important ones. And it has to be said that out of both the Tähtivaeltaja, Tähtifantasia, and Kuvastaja award winners, well, Åcon as well, quite a few of the Finnish authors who have since been translated into different languages have won these awards before being translated into different languages. So it's kind of like a great stepping stone for many of them, and it is still a great honor to win any of these awards.
Great. I don't know, Mikołaj, because you were
I think
already smiling.
Yeah, based on Hugo, what you suggested was quite obvious. We have quite a bunch of different awards. I think the most notable ones are Janusz Seidel Award, which is awarded yearly at Worldcon, and it's as old as Worldcon. We also have it's awarded in the novel and short story categories, and it's based on Hugo. It's pretty much Polish version of Hugo, let's say. We also have since 2008, I think, Jerzy Żuławski Award, which is awarded at Copernicon, and it's awarded by a jury of scientists and people knowledgeable in field. And we have also Fan Award for Best Finnish Activity, which is the Papier Award, named after a member of Gdańsk Fantasy Club. We also have few other awards like Nova Fantastica Awards, which are awarded by our biggest monthly magazine, Nova Fantastica. There are, I think, Schlongfe are still the oldest awards, which are
to say that you're humble not to mention.
Club.
I was going to mention that you are humble, not mentioning the one that you are part of as well. Your club.
And there were also for 2 years, and I heard rumors that they probably will be back, the Percon IDs awarded by Percon.
We also have Quentin Award for the best role-playing game scenario.
Oh, yeah, obviously. Sorry, I forgot about that.
No worries. And we used to have an anti-award also awarded, let's say, by Silesian Sci-Fi Club. It was called Golden Meteor, and it was awarded for the worst contribution to fandom, or the worst thing one could do to sci-fi in general. It was, I believe, some pretty bad publishers got it, someone who wrote something nasty about fandom got it, and so on. It was, and I believe it was plastic antler. It was like a statue of plastic antlers, very badly designed and made.
I think that there are also plenty that were awarded during the Skiercon recently. Looking at Vinga.
Yeah, basically we do have some, but there are more locally. I believe actually every big society, every big organization has their own when they can give anything back to their local contributors. So yeah, we do have some also.
And some of them doesn't exist anymore. I think that there was one in Krakow, in Lesser Poland, was Golem, but it's no longer continued, let's say. But yeah, there were plenty in the past as well.
There was, I believe, Electribout Award, Silver Moon, or something award. We used to have a bunch of them, and almost all of them are gone.
Indeed. On the other note, still connected with writing, which very often the awards are for the writers in different formats. How is the culture of writing fanzines still holding up? Because I know that in Poland, definitely, I think we can start with Poland this time, but it still exists, although it bumps as well. I mean, there is less fanzines, I think, considerably less, let's say, in the past. But how generally speaking, the fanzines writing culture holds these days? Are people still writing fanzines? I maybe I can look at Marcin, because you wrote one in the past.
Yeah, and I have no time to do it anymore.
You're publishing RPGs these days, I know.
I would say that fanzine culture is not holding well in Poland. There are still some sci-fi societies that do publish their own fanzines. There are some people doing fanzines as well, but everyone moved to Facebook, internet, and so on. So we don't even get. There was a moment in early 2000 when we got a lot of internet fanzines. Now we don't have that. We don't even have that. But I must say that there is some resurgence in interest in fanzines. People are asking about them. Some people try doing them, and so maybe we'll see fanzines again. But right now, I think you could count, I don't know, 10 of them, and that would be it.
Yeah, maybe worth to mention that there are a few noble examples of things that are popping up. One led by Marcin, Kalkua, which you know, but there are less and less indeed. How does it look in Finland in general? How the fanzine culture looked in the past versus today? If there were fanzines in general, but I believe that they were probably, hopefully still are.
There used to be more fanzines. I mean, sure, there used to be more, and some of them dropped out. I don't think, for example, that COVID killed any of them, but obviously there used to be more. But as mentioned, the internet is a thing nowadays. That being said, we still have several that do come out, specifically society-related fanzines. The Turku Science Fiction Society has their own spin. Jyväskylä Science Fiction Society has their 42. The science fiction and fantasy authors have their own Kosmoskynä, Cosmos Pen, where they, for example, review short stories by up-and-coming writers and basically offer a lot of this really, really valuable service, honestly, to authors. But the two biggest ones, and these always have been the biggest ones, are the Helsinki Science Fiction Society Tähtivaeltaja Star Rover, which has been around since the mid-80s, and unfortunately I don't have a copy of that at hand. They're all in a different room. It comes out 4 times a year. And then there is another magazine, Portti, the gate, which you can't see because I can't hold it properly. There we go. Which is by the Tampere Science Fiction Society and also comes out 4 times a year. Now, Portti is notable that it organizes each year a short story competition, which sure other people do, as other organizations do as well. But the Portti one actually has a monetary prize, and it is over €1,000, which is pretty big for a association-led, prize. But I think Portti and Tähtivaeltaja, they have been around the longest. They have very different kind of viewpoints. Basically, Portti deals a lot with the history of science fiction. Also, a lot of Finnish authors, has a lot of, as I said, history. If you want to know what was really up and cool, like say 60 years ago, read Portti. Tähtivaeltaja, on the other hand, is very much a forward-facing magazine. So it has interviews and articles about authors we haven't heard of yet. So if you want to know what's going to be hot in science fiction 3 years from now, read Tähtivaeltaja. So it's really worth reading them both. They're really not competing against each other content-wise. And as I said, they both come out 4 times a year. Finnish Tolkien Society still has their own fanzine, which comes out occasionally, let's put it that way. But these are I think the ones that we've got right now. There might be other small ones which I don't remember, and obviously online ones like the Inhörning and the Finnish Swedish magazine.
Great. Moving on, we have some time left. I have a few questions. I didn't saw any questions in the Q&A. Just having a look at right now if there's anything popping up, but I don't see anything, so I think we can continue. I have maybe a few last questions for that last minutes, but more on your opinion on how local fandom in your countries is connected to the global fandom. Yeah, I mean, by saying so, it's of course hard to measure because it's more on the individual level, but is it generally speaking popular to travel to conventions abroad, or are local clubs, if you know about any, connected to wider fandom, let's say, not necessarily with particular country, but maybe also considering Eurocons that we have in Europe, but also Worldcons, as occasionally they are happening in Europe, which is definitely easier for us to travel to, but also sometimes maybe people are considering traveling abroad further to US or other locations also to attend. How well connected these days your local fandom you think is with the wider global fandom?
Well, there has been a couple of Finn invasions in couple of cons around Europe already, like hundreds of Finnish people making trips to conventions around, like EasterCon. There's basically 300 Finns every year in UK. So yeah, Finns are pretty easy to travel with within the limits of Europe, at least.
I think quite a few Finns. I mean, there's the certain group of people who always go to Eurocons. A lot of Finns go to Swaycons, for example. With Worldcons, obviously, when they are in Europe, it's easy to travel there. Dublin 2019 had a huge number of Finns. I would not be entirely surprised if Glasgow saw that same as well. But it really depends a lot, and it depends on where they are and all that. And obviously, once we get to the part where we get to promote stuff, then I have to talk about Eurocon. We do get there, right?
The next one is in the Rotterdam, just week after
in
Glasgow.
Poland. And after that, it's in Finland.
Yes, it is. Do you want me to promote it now? Because I'm gonna send you a link. It is going to be Archipelagcon 2, which is gonna be the Eurocon for 2025. It is in the Åland Islands, so it's not the mainland Finland. It's very, very easy to get there. Let's be frank. I mean, either from Helsinki or from Turku or from Stockholm, it's very easy to get there. Fabulous people coming in. We've got Jeff and Vandermeer, we got Mats Strandberg and Mita Ranta, and it's going to be a fantastic con. I say this as I sound like I'm in the committee. I'm officially not yet in the committee, but I would not be surprised if I were at some point. But I figured I have to promote Archipelagcon. You have to be there. Last time, 2015, it was a blast.
And the keyword is yet.
Yeah, there is that.
How about Polish fandom then? We do not have planned Eurocon, but we had few in Poland in the past. I think 3 of them, if I'm not mistaken.
We are definitely not discussing and thinking about doing Eurocon in Warsaw. Yeah, we had third Eurocon, which was mentioned by Martin already in Poznań. We had Eurocon in Tracon. I have no idea what year it was. I was
1991.
91.
Yeah, I was -7 years old.
It was Tracon combined with Eurocon, I believe.
There was one in Gdańsk, and there was one in Czeski, Cieszyn, and
I missed the one in Cieszyn. Sorry, then 4. Indeed.
Yeah, there were 4 for now, and no Worldcons, and also not any plans for Worldcon.
For the Worldcon, I know that sometimes we entertain the idea, but I think that a lot of people think if we are mature enough organization, let's say, or organizational wise, let's say, to manage that. So maybe we need to.
I am planning to have a bid for Worldcon 2137 and mega ribbons.
Yeah, it is an inside joke right now.
I see Krakow. I was not there, but I assume, Marcin, that you were there.
No, I wasn't. I only heard stories about Eurocon in Krakow, where you were not able to find the conrunners, program was non-existent, or you were not able to find it because it was held in 3 different venues, but nothing was written in English about program. No one was taking any responsibility for anything. And apparently someone from the UK made a con game about going to a convention where you get all the program, all the printed materials in some foreign language that nobody speaks, and you are supposed to find your way around. So we just left some legacy after that apparent disaster that was Eurocon 1991.
I have one question in the Q&A, which we can pick up now, maybe. There was a question from people in the chat asking age-wise, how does the demographic looks in general when it comes to the fandom in various locations, but also when it comes to the conventions themselves. Yeah. So are we? I guess that the question is if we're looking at younger audience, the young adults, or maybe more. I wouldn't call it older, but full adults. I don't know how to call it basically. But what demographics we're looking at on average in general?
I think it totally depends on the convention. For example, I don't know. You can go to most of Polish Polcons and you'll see that the age is much higher. For example, I don't know, in Scandinavia, our main target is high schoolers and students, so it's mostly those people. But well, actually, I think in any part of our fandom, you can find either a 13-year-old that likes playing tabletop RPGs and a 60-year-old that enjoys manga and anime. So I think that's the beauty of fandom, that it doesn't matter what age you are, you can do whatever.
Yeah, but I believe even Polcons, which are quite old in participants' age sense, they are still younger than Worldcons or Eurocons I attended. Like, I think the average age for Åcon currently maybe is around 40, 45 years old. While for most conventions, I know the local ones, it's, as you said, targeted for mostly students and young people. And then the average age is, I think, around 25. I don't know data for other conventions, but our conventions in Warsaw, the winter one, the more RPG related and closed one, had average age for the last year 34 years, I believe, what we had from our surveys, and our summer convention is a little younger audience, with younger audience, something like 27, I think, 28. I'm not sure, I don't remember correctly, but it was around this number.
Yeah.
I think in Finland it is the same. I mean, the Finnish Finncon attendees tend to be slightly older, maybe, than, for example, the AnimeCon goers or even RopaCon goers, let alone Tracon goers, but still younger than your typical Worldcon goer. This year in the Finncon con committee, I think I was probably the oldest member of the con committee. Our youngest ones, we had several people under the age of 20 this year in the con committee, which was absolutely wonderful, because obviously the problem of fandom, getting older, it's a thing around the world. But of course, we also do have a lot of people who bring in their offspring, who have kind of produced the next generation of potential con goers and maybe even convention organizers. Toni, looking at you, I know you've brought your offspring to conventions. I've seen them at conventions, so yeah. And at least this year, we had one person whose parents have been involved in conventions for a number of years. So there is also that. And then there are people who bring their 5-year-olds to conventions, which is also great. But of course, something that the organizers also need to kind of take into account, that when you have a 13-year-old who wants to play role-playing games, that's fairly easy. You can do that, but you do want to have something for the 7-year-olds as well, and maybe even younger. So that's something we do want to always kind of keep in mind.
Is it, maybe just additional question then, is it then something that you cater for also in the programming of the convention?
We try to.
Yes,
We try
yes,
to.
we try
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
Yeah, RopaCon, I
Depends
think, is very good at this. Yeah.
Yeah, we have this bouncy castle for the children and the old one as well. It depends on the time of clock when it's open for children and the adults.
We're all children in the end of the day, yeah.
Not when we're all in the same bouncy castle. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, like Kisu said, my daughter was 1 month old on her first RopaCon. 6.5 weeks. My wife just corrected me, and now she's 19. So she's been on every RopaCon available, and other cons as well. And she's going to be a con organizer soon, maybe next year.
That's 19 years of preparation. Long last. I see another question in the chat, in the Q&A, sorry. Then the question is, how LGBTQ plus friendly are conventions, in particular cases of Finland and Poland? And again, I guess that it really depends on the convention, but is there a general trend in either direction, basically, currently?
At least in Finland, we try to be as friendly as possible.
Yes.
I think convention organizers may take concrete steps to make events as friendly as possible. So I think there is that. It is something that we pay attention to.
Yeah, we have inclusive ways to make everybody welcome, and there's a zero tolerance policies on every con in Finland about harassment and stuff like that. And like said before, our security staff is basically trained professionals always, so that helps.
I cannot say for every convention in Poland, but I think most of them, at least for now, has some kind of code of conduct, and we have policies against it. against harassment, not against, yeah, and way to provide support and help and other issues to solve other issues in connect with that. And I think it's getting better. I don't have huge in years experience since I started 8 years ago. But even during these 8 years, I was a part of a fandom. I can see a huge change in this in Poland, and I think it's really inclusive now.
The pronouncers themselves are slowly getting to conventions. I think that some are already in Poland introducing those, but not all of them yet.
Actually, I believe that while the whole Polish country isn't very welcoming to the LGBT community, unfortunately, but I believe that the conventions in general are kind of like safe spaces for us, and yeah, let's keep it that way, at least for now.
Yeah, again, it's hard probably to put the average because it really probably depends on the convention we're looking at. But I agree with Mikołaj that it really changes in the last years for better. Let's say we're way more aware how to address certain things or have a particular code of conduct in place and make sure that people know about it. We're slowly running out of time. I have 2 questions, unless there will be more in the Q&A. Starting with maybe a tricky one, if you know about any, but are there any interesting customs or anything that maybe associations or clubs invented, let's say, during conventions or locally that you know about? Or maybe any traditions, I mean, that are continued during the national convention or during other events that may be interesting to mention?
That we know about and can talk about.
Yeah, but that's a fair point.
Yeah,
that's a very fair
that
point.
can talk about everything that happens in a green room stays in a green room, right?
Well, I could probably go first because this is something that we can talk about, and it is a really strange custom at Finncons. But there is a Finnish filk group that insists on singing or creating filks for the guests of honor each year and then performing them at the evening party. And the thing is, I say this with all the love, is that not all members of said filk group are very good singers. Some are excellent, some are really good. Others are not. But it is something that we've been doing since 2005, and it is something that occasionally catches our guests by surprise, unless they already know about this custom. But that is a very silly and very stupid custom. And that first year when we did this in 2005, and Vandermeer recorded the thing that we did for Jeff that year and posted on YouTube, and that was a bit of a surprise. But it has been continuing ever since. So that's a strange custom that I can talk about. And yes, I was one of the people who started it, so I have to brag a little bit about it.
Is that YouTube video somewhere still there somewhere? No.
Nope.
gone in the internet history somewhere. I know that we have we used to have, I don't know if it's still cultivated, but there was some singing related customs from one of the associations from Poland, from Poznań. I think Druga Era had a customs to sing something during conventions at midnight. Don't remember what was that.
Południca by Kazimierz Krzyżkowiak and Silna Grupa pod Wezwaniem.
Yeah, but I never knew when it came from exactly and why it was basic cult. I think that I heard it during one of the NatCons, but I don't know if they do it at every convention that they are part of or during the national convention only. Yeah, we don't have anyone from that club here, so probably the question will be unanswered. But maybe it's worth to mention that we do have a tradition to give a title of a dragon, of fandom dragon, you can call it, to people who are attending, not necessarily attending, that was in the past, attending national conventions for 10 years straight, or not straight, in general 10 years. 10 editions. Yeah, now it's slightly changed, so it's proposed because it's not given by default. There is like a list that people are gathering, the nominees, let's say, of people who should be awarded. for people who are active in the fandom for 10 plus years. Yeah, so if you are nominated for the list and you accept to receive it, then during the national convention there is a whole ceremony, which is something we cannot talk about. But generally speaking, there is such institution, let's say, which is not formalized anyhow. It's really like done by the fandoms.
You get a nice diploma when you become a dragon or a drakeling.
Dragonling, I guess, little dragon.
Yes, something like that. But for general Polish fandom custom, almost everyone has a nickname. I don't know why it is this way, because this is the way, apparently. And I would say that, like, I don't know, 95% of people involved in Polish fandom have a nickname. So it doesn't matter what your name is. I used to know people by only their nickname, having no clue what their real name is. I never needed that.
Yeah. And speaking of dead dog parties, Kisu, you mentioned it in chat. Actually, I think, and again, correct me guys if I'm wrong, but in Poland, the idea of a dead dog party, especially for maybe science fiction fantasy convention, doesn't really exist. So there are usually no dead dog parties.
It starts slowly, but I think it's mostly for con runners and volunteers. For at the events, I know they have a dead dog party. It's mostly for the team creating the event.
Yeah, and indeed there was like there was mentioned Leikomaa. Leikomaa is a company selling yogurt basically in Poland, but they also sponsor one of the convention mentioned in the chat. And indeed, I experienced that example, let's say, of cult cult in the brackets.
Yeah, actually, I'm a fan of another custom. It comes from a very stupid French comédie. So whenever anyone in a Polish convention shouts that it's going to be dark soon, you can hear a crowd of people answering, "Shut up." But when it's like 1,000 people shouting at you, it is, well, quite amusing.
Yeah, that happens as well.
Yeah, and it happens anytime, anywhere, everywhere during the 9 on the sleep room.
Which is probably not desired.
Whatever.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, coming back to the dead dog party, indeed, you mentioned that, especially Mikołaj, you mentioned that the con runners used to have, because usually con runners are too busy to party during the event, as you can imagine. Most of you know probably that by experience, but indeed that became a thing that after the convention, indeed, that the con runners of that particular event usually try to get the break, grab a beer or beverage or whatever they had them basically, and try to cool down basically and relax a bit and celebrate also.
I think our dead dog parties tend to be quite like that as well, and that's one of the things that's always said, that the security staff needs their sauna afterwards, so that's why we always have sauna afterwards, or we try to. Not always, depends on the place, but we try to have one. But it's not really a strange custom because this is Finland, and we tend to have saunas all over the place.
The only country that has a McDonald's with sauna inside.
Yes.
if that's a random fact from Finland. Last question from my side. I think that we don't have any more questions. At least I don't see any in the Zoom Q&A. And that question is for all of you. Again, in order you prefer to answer it. If you were to encourage, let's say, someone to, if they travel, of course, to your country, to get involved or engage with the local fandom, either through associations, clubs, or maybe convention that happens to take place around the location they are traveling, the people will be traveling to, what will be your recommendation? So where to start to get the Finnish or Polish fandom, respectively? And that's not a question to the groups; it's individual question. So when exactly will you send that people recommend them to start?
And I go first because my recommendation is for people who don't want to travel. There is a way of doing something very Finnish online, live, one of the things that cropped up during the past couple of years is something called Geek Pub Culture Pub Quiz. And I'm trying to post a link into YouTube. It is the last Monday of each month, except this month it's going to be already next week. It is bilingual pub quiz run in both Finnish and English, and you can take part online completely. You can, of course, come to the pub where it is actually run live, but this is a kind of a weird and strange way to get involved in one aspect of Finnish fandom. There is obviously a YouTube channel and all that where you can actually talk to people and so on. So that's for the people who don't want to or can't travel. And obviously our conventions season is coming to an end now, so you'll have to wait until next year. But apart from that, I would say Finns are very friendly and nice, and talk to us on Facebook.
Lovely. That's a really nice initiative. Any other recommendations from anyone? Where to start meeting?
If you are talking about not traveling somewhere, I can once again recommend even from my own society, so from Avantgarda, we are since beginning of the pandemic. In the third week of the pandemic, we started our online convention, and we will be doing 4th edition now in 2 months. We usually have international guests, and we and we are open for international public. We have maybe not most, but I think around half of the program in English because of the guests. And and it will happen in 2 or 3 months. We do not have the set date yet for this year edition. But since the first edition was made during first 2 weeks of pandemic, so I don't think it's a huge problem in this context.
Great, indeed. Okay, I don't hear any more, so I think we can stop here. Just checking briefly if there are no more questions, but I don't see any. So unless you want to ask also, you also have a right to ask questions, all of you, dear panelists. But if no questions also from your side, then from my end, big thanks to all of you. We had Marianna, we had Vinga, we had Tony, Marcin, and Mikołaj in the panel. So once again, thank you very much for sharing all the stories and all the very interesting information about both fandoms and how they operate, let's say, on a daily basis. For those who'd like to revisit, there was YouTube run in the background, so we had some people watching through YouTube, and the recording will be there as well, so you can always revisit this panel. If you like merch, and I think people generally tend to like merch, we have some for the Glasgow 2024, so we have it on the redbubble.com. If you fancy a new lovely t-shirt or any other item there, the link is in the chat, so you can always get there. We have another upcoming event in September, roughly 1 month from now. That's the media of storytelling, print versus screen, with a few people: Dan Hanks, Jim McLeod, John Coxon, and RWW Greeny. So I also encourage everyone to consider joining this event. It is also through Eventbrite, and it will be available through YouTube. Check our socials. So we have a lot of things happening for the Glasgow 2024. It's less than 1 year from now. So look for the memberships, as the rate will be going higher soon. So if you don't have your membership and you plan to join the Worldcon next year, I do recommend to go to our website, which is www.glasgow2024.org. And if you like the events that we run, and we have a lot of them behind, and a lot of those that will be run in the next weeks, months this year, please consider volunteering. We are looking for volunteers for the next year's Glasgow 2024 Worldcon, so you can also find more on our website. So that being said, that's it for today's evening. Once again, thank you everyone for joining, for tuning in, for the panelists, for the discussion, and see you in the next one.
Thanks a lot. It was great to meet you. Kudos.
Yeah, you too. See you in Glasgow.
See you in Glasgow,
Yeah.
if not sooner.